All right, so today we're really diving deep into this incredible story, how we as humans figured out how to find and make new medicines.
Yeah, and the journey is just fascinating. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
about going from ancient practices all the way to AI. A lot to unpack there.
A lot. And we've got a lot of great information to work with. So our mission here is to really trace that evolution, highlight some of those key changes, and maybe uncover some surprising facts along the way.
Definitely. It's really a testament to, well, human curiosity and that constant drive to find ways to improve our health, right? Whatever the tools of the time were.
Exactly. So let's go all the way back to the beginning, to the pre-scientific era. For thousands of years, people relied on what they observed in nature, what seemed to work.
Right. Like if you think about ancient Egypt, they were using willow bark for pain relief. And we know this from the Ebers Papyrus. It's really an early example of observing a natural remedy and its specific effect.
And that willow bark, it contained salicin, the same stuff that's in aspirin today.
Exactly. And it's not just Egypt. You look at ancient Greece and you have someone like Dioscorides painstakingly cataloging medicinal plants in De Materia Medica. It's like an early attempt to systematically document nature's
A
pharmacy.
real pharmacopoeia.
Absolutely. And at the same time, you have these complex systems like traditional Chinese medicine or TCM and Ayurveda in India. They were developing these incredibly sophisticated herbal and mineral preparations, showing really that this drive to heal and understand the body was global.
Totally. So then we move into the 19th century. And this is where things start to get really interesting. We call it the rise of pharmacology. But what actually changed?
Well, you have the scientific revolution taking hold, and with it, these massive leaps in chemistry and physiology. And so, for the first time, scientists could actually isolate the active components from these natural remedies that people had been using for centuries.
Okay, so like moving from the entire plant to the specific chemical that was actually doing the work.
Exactly. Think about morphine being isolated from opium in 1806, or quinine from cinchona bark in 1820. That was a game changer, being able to pinpoint that specific molecule.
Right. And that ability to isolate these molecules also led to synthetic chemistry, which meant that now we could create new medicines in the lab.
And that led to another huge shift, studying drug effects in animals more systematically. So now you're talking about the beginnings of experimental pharmacology, trying to understand how drugs really work inside the body.
Right, a much more targeted approach than before. And this is also when Pasteur comes along with the germ theory, and suddenly we understand the link between microorganisms and
Which
disease.
then paves the way for antimicrobials.
Another huge breakthrough, being able to actually target the cause of these infections. So we go from observing what works in nature to understanding the underlying mechanisms. Then the 20th century arrives, and this is when things explode. We're talking about understanding disease at the molecular level.
Right. We enter what we call the modern era of medicine. And a key concept that emerges here is target-based drug discovery. It's this idea that you can focus on very specific molecules in the body that are involved in the disease process.
So it's like finding that one faulty gear in a complex machine.
Yes, instead of trying to affect everything, it becomes about finding the specific target and hitting it. And then, of course, you have the antibiotic era, starting with penicillin.
Right. The discovery of penicillin was a monumental shift in how we treated infections.
Absolutely. And then technology comes into play in a big way. High throughput screening and combinatorial chemistry. These techniques dramatically accelerated the process.
So explain those for our listeners.
Sure. High throughput screening is essentially an automated way to test thousands of compounds very rapidly to see if they have any effect on a particular target. And combinatorial chemistry allows you to synthesize huge libraries of diverse molecules.
So now we're not just looking for a needle in a haystack, we're creating a ton of needles.
Precisely. And then at the same time, you have rational drug design emerging. This is where we're using the 3D structures of those targets. We're actually designing drugs to fit them like a key in a lock.
So it's becoming even more precise, even more targeted. And then on top of all of this, you have the Human Genome Project, and suddenly we have this entire landscape of potential drug targets thanks to genomics and proteomics.
Right. And alongside this, biotechnology takes off. Now we're talking about biopharmaceuticals, protein-based drugs like insulin, antibodies, even gene therapies.
A whole new class of medicines.
And all of this progress sets the stage for the 21st century, where we're dealing with this explosion of data and computational power.
So what are some of the big trends that we're seeing now?
Well, artificial intelligence and machine learning are starting to be applied across the entire drug discovery pipeline. From identifying disease targets to predicting how effective a drug might be, to actually designing new molecules.
So we're really leveraging data in ways we couldn't even imagine before.
Exactly. And then there's personalized medicine, the idea that we can tailor treatments based on an individual's genetic makeup.
So we're talking about medicine designed specifically for you. And our sources also mentioned a few other exciting areas like systems biology, drug repurposing, advanced biologics, nanotechnology.
All of these are pushing us towards a more nuanced and targeted approach to treating disease.
And I think it's important to remember that amidst all of this incredible progress, the process of actually developing a new drug is still incredibly complex.
Yes, you have target identification and validation, lead discovery, lead optimization, then preclinical studies, then clinical trials, which have multiple phases, and then finally regulatory approval and post-market surveillance.
It's a long journey. From idea to medicine.
It is. But it's amazing to think how far we've come. From observing natural remedies to designing drugs at a molecular level, it's an inspiring story.
It really is.
Yeah.
And as we move deeper into the 21st century, with all of this innovation happening, especially with AI and personalized medicine, what do you think the future holds? What new possibilities can our listeners imagine for healthcare?
Well, that's something for everyone to ponder. It's certainly an exciting time to be following these advances.
It is. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive.